So check out these protests that happened yesterday in LA. Over 350,000 people rallying as the situation is hitting a real flashpoint around the globe. This is now street level momentum in multiple cities around the world. It was yesterday's global day of action, and we saw over 1 million Iranians and supporters of the free people of Iran rally worldwide in dozens of cities, and everyone here is pushing hard for regime change amid the regime's brutal crackdowns. And then at the same time, the US will have multiple carriers in the Middle East here within a few days. Mossad's David Barnea is coordinating in Florida, so what could be happening during those talks? And then President Trump's negotiating team has told him that a nuclear deal looks difficult to impossible with Iran. And then the Ayatollah is warning of an all-out regional war if he's targeted. But at the end of the day, Iran at this point, it looks to me, doesn't have a big power backer like China or Russia that would step in. I mean, they've done some things to help out, dropped off some surface-to-air radars, just a few little gifts, maybe a few fireworks that China dropped off to Iran, but it doesn't look like they have that China-Russia connection that maybe some people thought they did, with the US and Israel teaming up to squeeze off the flow of oil from Iran to China. So at this point, all bets are off when it comes to the relationships between Russia and China. But stay to the end, because we're going to touch on all of these things a little more. Plus, I'll give you a personal perspective on why it looks like it's taking a while when President Trump said help is on the way. I'll tell you at the end of this video, just on a personal note, of what I think's going on, so stay to the end for that. But with the protests amplifying, carriers positioning, intel syncing up, it's like the situation is about to finally reach a climax. Yesterday, February 14th, exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi called for the global day of action, and it delivered big. Over 1 million people rallied across 30 countries, 73 cities. Some of the biggest turnouts were in Munich, around 250,000 at the Munich Security Conference sidelines. LA hit a historic 350,000, and Toronto hit around 350,000 as well. Protesters waved the pre-1979 flag, and they chanted for regime overthrow, and they're basically backing that internal uprising where tens of thousands of Iranians have been killed. We likely won't get the exact number out of the regime, obviously, but these are incredibly brave protesters basically facing this brutal regime head on with a ton of courage. It's just amazing to see how much courage the Iranian people have that are still out there protesting, knowing that this regime is more than willing to cut their life short. That just shows the courage and the will and the grit of the Iranian people, and I think that speaks well for what comes after should this conflict go down. But inside Iran, rooftop chants against Khamenei, the current Ayatollah, are persistent despite repression and a full internet blackout, but the US has brought in Starlinks to try to get some Iranians back online. Exiled Crown Prince Pahlavi spoke in Munich urging Trump to have the people's back and outlined a democracy transition of what it would look like should a democracy take hold again in Iran. But it looks like all these different rallies around the globe are supercharging internal unrest and piling pressure before the Geneva talks next week. But with those talks, the protesters in Iran, it's worth saying, they don't have a seat at the table, nor do the millions abroad who are protesting for that regime change. They have zero direct voice in these indirect talks that are happening between the US and happening between Iran. So I think it's just worth noting that the protesters in Iran, who could be killed every single day that they're out there protesting, they don't have a direct seat at the table. And I think when I see the rally happening around the globe, that's kind of what's being stood up for, is basically saying, hey, these brave protesters in Iran who are courageously risking their lives for a better life for themselves and their children don't have a seat at this table, and the Iranian regime is never going to make a deal that's good for them. But those next rounds of talks will take place Tuesday in Geneva with US envoys like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, likely the ones leading those negotiations. Iran has hinted at flexibility on highly enriched uranium for sanctions relief, but they've said that their ballistic missiles, up to 2,000 ballistic missiles, are off the table, and that's a red line. They're not willing to negotiate that. And that's one of the main risks to a lot of countries in the area, because the regime is basically seeing those missiles as their survival play. They basically think if they give those missiles up, the regime is done. But Iran's top leadership, including Khamenei, is very blunt. He said that any strike targeting the Ayatollah triggers an all-out regional war. Obviously, that's what they're going to say. Full missile arsenals, proxies everywhere. But the rhetoric from Iran is up to level 11, with Khamenei accusing President Trump of being a criminal and causing all of these protests. Also, the president of Iran said there were unexploded GBU-57 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs in their nuclear sites, so we're not allowed to go in and inspect them. Well, here's one thing I would say to that. You know how you get rid of unexploded ordnance? You blow it up. So I say we just let them know, hey, you got an unexploded ordnance problem in your nuclear facility? No problem. We know how to handle that. We'll send down another GBU-57 to take care of that. It's a safety issue after all, right? And Iran doesn't have that great power patron shield like North Korea gets from China. North Korea is basically China's quirky little brother, keeping the US tied up on the Korean peninsula. And China's basically like, hey, North Korea, cause a little mayhem over here. Make the US stay on their toes over here. Wait, whoa, not too much. Nope, that's a little bit too much. Get back in your place. So if action comes from the US going into Iran in the next few days, weeks, or months, the US to me needs to prioritize 0 American lives lost. That's the ultimate goal. So a lot of people have been saying, well, President Trump said help is on the way. Why hasn't action been taken so soon? Well, in my opinion, every single military member is valuable. Every single member of your unit or squadron, yeah, even that weird guy or gal, is valuable, and all of them deserve to come home safe. So the preparation and planning for an operation like Iran is something that I studied for basically my entire career, Iran and North Korea. So if you think about the Iran conflict, you have to be very strategic, because it's basically like an octopus with multiple different tentacles. When you think of their proxy army, their ballistic missiles, their potential death squads that will activate around the world, you have to really understand the ripples when the conflict starts. And that takes a massive amount of strategy up front. You can't just dive in and ask questions later. At that point, you're risking American military lives unnecessarily, and American military members are national treasures. So I know that's hard to hear for anyone who's in Iran right now, a lot of you that watch my channel, or any of you that have family members in Iran, but it's equally important that we make sure we're protecting the US military members, because again, they are national treasures. Them out there doing what they do every single day is why we can have the actual conversation of actually ending this regime. So it's on all of us to make sure that we're encouraging and supporting super dialed in strategy and leadership that gives all of them the maximum opportunity to come home safe. And that's why the US will likely prioritize overwhelming air power, precision strikes, cyber hits on regime tentacles like Hezbollah, Houthis, the IRGC networks, potentially drawing from Israel's quick wins in the past operations that happened in 2025. US military is completely unmatched, but again, this has to be approached in a very facilitated way that takes care of all those tentacles while you're taking down the main part. So there's been some rumors out there about direct talks between Trump and the president of Iran, but basically that president has said that the Ayatollah has to sign off and approve of it. Basically, he's like, well, I got to make sure daddy's okay with this, because I'm basically controlled and I'm a puppet of the Ayatollah. But I wonder what they would even talk about, because at this point, it looks like the president of Iran is just toting the hard line of the Ayatollah. And then Mossad director David Barnier landed in Florida mid-January for 2026 Iran crisis talks, and likely still engaged in those talks, potentially going back and forth a few different times, primarily meeting White House envoy Steve Witkoff in Miami. The focus would be crackdown response, potential strikes, Geneva coordination, US-Israel strategy alignment to pressure regime without immediate escalation. Again, those sanctions choking off their oil and flow of revenue. But a lot of this is strategy at this point, and Trump's key guys, Witkoff and Kushner, reportedly warned Trump that a meaningful nuclear deal is difficult to impossible to achieve. Trump asked what the odds are, and they pointed to no lasting positive West-Iran agreement potentially ever. Non-compliance track record is kind of the big thing there. Iran's basically made deals. They haven't complied. They've made excuses. They've gaslit us like that crazy ex-girlfriend. And I think at the end of the day, everybody's just a little bit tired of it, because it's just weird to think of making a deal with someone that's slaying thousands of their own people and has gone back on the deals they've made in the past time and time again for 47 years. But if things do go kinetic, a quick overview of what would happen. So the carriers are going to be the stars of the show at the beginning of this, with FA-18 Super Hornets blasting off of those carriers with F-35s. Those two teamed up are insanely capable aircraft. F-35 has 43,000 pounds of thrust. Also in the mix will be EA-18G Growlers. Those will be doing a ton of jamming on the different surface-to-air missile sites should things get hot. And then MQ-9 Reapers will be up above, providing 24-hour around-the-clock targeting and ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, letting higher headquarters know exactly what's going on. Because again, it's going to be like an exploding cantaloupe if this happens, with the IRGC scrambling, trying to get missiles off the ground. It's going to be a lot of different actions coming from the IRGC, like a guerrilla force would do. Basically unpredictable. So having that ISR up there and above is going to be huge. And leading the charge could be even B-52s with JASSM ERs. Those have a 500-mile plus standoff range. They can launch off of those B-52s, dozens of them, 1,000-pound warhead, striking specific sites in the IRGC command structure and basically taking down a lot of the IADs, the integrated air defense systems of Iran. So the B-52 might be a massive part of this initial volley. So let's talk about a section I like to call 4D chess, because at the end of the day, we've got these Geneva talks coming up, but if they were to fail, what would likely be the biggest outcome? Because the regime is not going to fold easy. They've got those tentacles everywhere. Hezbollah would be launching thousands of rockets at Israel, Houthis shutting down Red Sea shipping, Iraqi Shia militias hitting US bases even, plus cyber attacks by Quds Force operatives that are trying to stir up chaos. So you'd have to methodically take them all down. You'd have to start with leadership decapitation strikes, sanctions starving all the cash of the inner circle, and then isolating any of the IRGC from their command structure. And then likely you would start to have to pick off the command structure of the proxy networks as well, because they're not just going to go away overnight. They might shrivel up and die a little bit because the funding would be cut off, but you're going to have to make sure that they don't have the ability to operate and execute these terror attacks around the globe, which they've likely been told to do should anything go down in Iran. And the IRGC likely too deep in their ideology to be converted to some sort of a transition and democracy in Iran. And oh, by the way, they've been killing thousands of their own people. So how trustworthy are these guys? This might be the point where you just have to eliminate a lot more than what we saw in Venezuela with the 32 being eliminated. At this point, it could be a couple hundred, could be a couple thousand. It just depends on how hardline those IRGC members actually are after the Ayatollah falls. So let's talk about a realistic scenario for a few days prior to this going hot and then it actually going hot. So satellites, RQ-4 Global Hawks, persistent MQ-9 Reapers, basically painting yourself an entire picture of that area is going to be huge. That's going to give the carrier strike groups and CENTCOM, who's in charge of the area, time to position assets, pre-position Xbats, potentially those autonomous fighters for defense if they're ready to go. All the different autonomous systems you can get. The more unmanned aircraft you have up above while you're going in for that initial volley, that way you can make sure that you're seeing exactly what kind of surface-to-air missile sites are still available to go up against US forces. And then you got to counter those Shahed 136 drones, so having F-15Es ready to go, and then also assets in the area to shoot down those C-802 anti-ship missiles. That's going to be huge. Those are going to go out and try to hit the carriers themselves. So E-2D Hawkeyes, AWACSs, F-35s, F-22s with advanced radars, tracking and making sure that those C-802s don't actually have the ability to hit the carrier. So at this point, it would be all about stealth. Autonomous wingmen up there, hopefully teaming up with the F-35, using AI to dial in and find every single last threat of that Ayatollah regime. So at the end, it's all about knocking down all the different targets and then holding the defenses so nothing gets through to the carrier. It's like the Spartans holding that gate in 300 as best as you possibly can and making that final stand. So the bottom line here, unprecedented February 14th protests show how there's unity around the globe to overthrow this regime. The US wants a deal, but it's obviously prepping and preparing should that deal not happen. Thanks for watching, guys. Where do you think we go from here? Do you think we'll see action in the next few days or next few weeks? Would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. And then I'm doing a live every week in the Max Ready Room, so click the link in the description for that, and I'll see you guys there. I'm also posting on X and Instagram pretty much every day, so follow me there and then watch one of these videos that pops up right here. That's one of the best compliments you can give me, is just to click one of these videos. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.